The last thing Magnolia Castellane expected to find when she opened the door of her tiny apartment on a Tuesday night was a lawyer in an Armani suit holding a leather briefcase and a smile that screamed, "Your life is about to fall apart." "Miss Castellane?" he asked, adjusting his prescription glasses that probably cost more than her 3 months' rent. "If you're here to collect debts, apartment 304 is 2 floors up," Magnolia replied, already starting to close the door. It had been a hellish day at the veterinary hospital where she worked. Her hands still smelled like dog shampoo, and the only thing she wanted was to eat instant noodles in peace. "Actually, I'm here to deliver this to you." He extended a thick envelope with the golden crest of Whitmore and Associates embossed on it. "It's a legal summons. The instant noodles would have to wait." 10 minutes later, Magnolia was sitting on the second-hand sofa she'd bought, rereading for the 5th time words that simply made no sense. Compulsory marriage contract, testamentary clause activated, mandatory union with Mr. Theo Vanderbilt, 30-day deadline for appearance. Is this a prank? She looked at the lawyer, who remained standing in the living room, clearly uncomfortable with the decor that included 3 half-dead cacti and a vintage Casablanca poster. "Like, where are the hidden cameras?" "I'm afraid it's completely legitimate, miss." He cleared his throat. "The late Augusto Castellane, your paternal grandfather, left a rather unusual testamentary clause." Magnolia felt her stomach turn. She'd barely known her grandfather. The millionaire patriarch of the Castellane family had severed relations with her father, Roberto, when he decided to abandon the business to become a literature teacher. Since then, she'd grown up middle class, proudly distant from that world of privilege and coldness. "My grandfather died 3 months ago," she said slowly. "Why am I only finding out about this now?" The will had specific conditions. The lawyer opened his briefcase. "Your cousin, Leonardo Castellane, had priority in the inheritance. However, he died in a car accident 2 weeks ago." Magnolia paled. She didn't even know she had a cousin. "And what the hell does this have to do with me?" "You're next in the line of succession. But there's a condition. You need to marry the business partner chosen by your grandfather, Mr. Theo Vanderbilt, CEO of Vanderbilt Industries." He paused. "If you refuse, all the family fortune, including the company that employs 3,000 people, will be liquidated and donated to charity." "Great!" Magnolia jumped up. "Donate it all. I don't want this damn inheritance, and I certainly won't marry a stranger for money." "Miss Castellane." The lawyer hesitated. "There's more. Your Aunt Violet, your father's sister, is undergoing cancer treatment. Her health insurance is maintained by the family company. If the company is liquidated..." The world stopped. Aunt Violet, the only person in the Castellane family who had never abandoned her father. The sweet woman who sent handmade birthday cards every year, who paid for part of Magnolia's veterinary school even while earning little as a librarian. "You're blackmailing me," she whispered. "I'm just delivering the documentation, miss." He placed more papers on the coffee table. "Mr. Vanderbilt is aware of the situation. He has agreed to meet with you tomorrow at 2 p.m. at his office. The address is here." When the door closed, Magnolia was alone in the silence of her apartment, staring at the documents as if they were a death sentence. Theo Vanderbilt. She knew that name. Everyone knew it. The ruthless 32-year-old magnate who had transformed the company, inherited from his father, into a technological empire. Known for his business genius and his absolute lack of heart. The press both adored and feared him in equal measure. A man handsome as the devil and cold as ice. And now, somehow, she would be forced to marry him. Magnolia grabbed her phone and dialed the only person who could help her process this insanity. "Hi, Mag." Her best friend Julia's cheerful voice sounded from the other end. "Did you finally figure out you're going to watch that series I recommended? I need you to come here. Now. Bring wine. Lots of wine." "Oh my God, what happened? Did Dr. Patterson finally admit he's in love with you?" "Worse. Much worse." Magnolia looked at the documents again. "I'm going to have to marry a cruel millionaire I don't even know, or my aunt dies." There was a pause. "Okay, you can stop now." Where did you hide the real Magnolia? Because my best friend hates melodrama. Julia, it's not a joke. 40 minutes later, 2 bottles of cheap wine and 1 hysterical explanation later, Julia was lying on the living room floor, staring at the ceiling as if the universe's answers were written there. So let me see if I understand, she said, raising a finger. You, the woman who screamed in my face that you'd rather eat glass than get married before 40, are going to marry. She grabbed her phone and typed the name, this guy. She turned the screen around. It was a photo of Theo Vanderbilt at a tech conference. Perfectly styled black hair, sculpted jawline, amber eyes that seemed to pierce through the screen. A suit that probably cost a small country's GDP. Mag, I know the situation is horrible, but look at him! Julia practically screamed. He's as hot as Satan must be. He's a figurehead, Magnolia corrected, snatching the phone from her friend's hand. An unscrupulous businessman who agreed to this ridiculous scheme. What kind of person accepts an arranged marriage in the 21st century? The rich kind? Julia suggested. Meg, businessmen do strategic marriages all the time. It's like corporate chess. I'm not a chess piece. No, you're the queen, literally. Julia sat up, suddenly serious. Look, I know it sucks. But what about Aunt Violet? The silence that followed was deafening. Exactly, Julia murmured. So here's what you're going to do. Go to that meeting tomorrow. Look that demon in a suit in the eye and impose your conditions. My conditions. Of course. If he wants this marriage for business reasons, then it's a transaction. And in every transaction, you can negotiate. Julia stood up, entering the problem-solver mode that made her a brilliant publicist. Marriage on paper, separate lives, annulment after a while. Establish boundaries, protect your aunt, and move on with your life. Magnolia wanted to believe it was that simple. The next day, she stood in front of the mirrored skyscraper of Vanderbilt Industries, wearing her best and only blazer, and trying to control the trembling in her hands. The lobby looked like something out of an architecture magazine, all marble, brushed steel, and plants that were probably watered with imported mineral water. The receptionist, an impeccably dressed woman, guided her to the top floor in an elevator that rose so smoothly it felt like floating. Mr. Vanderbilt is expecting you, she said, opening a double door of dark wood. The office was the size of Magnolia's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. And there, with his back to her, looking out the window with his hands in his pockets, was him. Theo Vanderbilt turned around. The photos didn't do him justice. He was tall, absurdly tall, with broad shoulders under a dark gray suit. But it was the eyes that caught her. Liquid amber, intelligent, and cold as a blade. He assessed her from head to toe in 3 seconds, and Magnolia felt as if she'd been catalogued, analyzed, and filed away. Miss Castellane, he said, and even his voice was irritating, deep, controlled, with a touch of British accent that suggested education at expensive schools. Punctual, I appreciate that. Let's skip the formalities, Magnolia replied, forcing firmness into her voice. You know why I'm here. I know why you're in this. So let's get to the point. What the hell do you gain from this ridiculous marriage? One corner of his mouth curved. It wasn't exactly a smile. It was more predatory amusement. Straight to the point. I appreciate that too. He walked to the desk, leaning against the edge. Sit down. I prefer to stand. As you wish. Theo crossed his arms. Your grandfather and my father had an agreement. If I married the Castellane heiress, the 2 companies would merge, creating the country's largest tech pharmaceutical conglomerate. Stocks, patents, government contracts, everything. So it's just about money, she spat. It's always about money, Miss Castellane, and power. He tilted his head. But unlike you, I don't pretend there's something nobler at stake. You're here for your aunt. I'm here for the empire. We're both, in a way, hostages of greedy dead men. The brutal honesty caught her off guard. I'm not going to marry you, Magnolia said. but even to her own ears it sounded weak. No? Theo approached, each step measured. Then are you ready to explain to your aunt why she's going to lose the treatment that's keeping her alive? You're a monster. I'm practical. He stopped a meter away from her, and Magnolia had to raise her chin to face him. And so are you, or you wouldn't be here. So stop pretending moral indignation and let's negotiate like adults. Magnolia's blood boiled. Fine. My conditions. Marriage on paper only. Completely separate lives. No, anything. She felt her face heat up. And divorce as soon as legally possible. 3 years, Theo said immediately. I need 3 years to consolidate the merger and neutralize the board members who will contest. After that, you get a generous amount and your freedom. 2 years, she countered. 2.5 years. And you'll need to attend social events with me. We need to look like a minimally convincing couple. Magnolia wanted to scream, cry, punch that perfect, arrogant face. I hate you, she whispered. For the first time, something seemed to waver in those amber eyes. But it was so quick, she thought she imagined it. Good, Theo said softly. Hatred is honest. We'll get along fine. And as he extended his hand to seal the most insane deal of her life, Magnolia realized she had just sold her freedom to save someone she loved. The question that haunted her all the way back home was, what would be the real price of this bargain? Magnolia had exactly 48 hours between signing the contract and facing Aunt Violet. 48 hours to figure out how to explain that she'd sold herself into corporate matrimony without sounding like she'd lost her mind. She was still working on that explanation when her phone buzzed at 7 a.m. on Thursday. Unknown number. Car arriving at 9 a.m. Wear something elegant. We have an appointment. T. Magnolia stared at the screen, her coffee halfway to her mouth. Magnolia, I have work. And who gave you my number? Theo, your lawyer. I bought out your shift at the clinic. Wear navy or emerald green. You look washed out in pastels. Her jaw dropped. The audacity. The audacity. Magnolia, I'll wear whatever I damn well please. And you can't just buy my work schedule. Theo, already done. See you at 9. Don't be late. She wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, she marched to her closet and pulled out the brightest, most obnoxiously pink dress she owned, a sundress Julia had bought her as a joke last summer. If Theo Vanderbilt thought he could dictate her wardrobe, he was about to learn exactly how stubborn Magnolia Castellane could be. At 9 a.m. sharp, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up in front of her building. The driver, an older gentleman with kind eyes, opened the door with a small smile. Miss Castellane, I'm Frederick. Mr. Vanderbilt is waiting. Magnolia slid into the back seat and found herself face to face with Theo, who was typing something on his phone with surgical precision. He looked up, and his expression, for just a fraction of a second, was almost comical. I said navy or emerald green, he said flatly, staring at her aggressively pink dress. And I said I'd wear whatever I pleased. She smiled sweetly. Where are we going? To get you a ring. He pocketed his phone. We're announcing the engagement next week. You need to look the part. I need to look the part? Magnolia's voice rose. Listen here. You overgrown calculator. Overgrown calculator? For the first time, she saw genuine amusement flicker across his face. That's creative. Most people just call me a bastard. I'm sure you've earned both titles. The corner of his mouth twitched. Was that almost a smile? No. Impossible. Demons didn't smile. They arrived at Cartier on 5th Avenue, and Magnolia's stomach dropped. She'd walked past this store 100 times, never daring to even look in the windows. Now she was being ushered inside like she belonged there. A perfectly coiffed saleswoman named Margot appeared instantly, her smile so bright it could light up a small city. Mr. Vanderbilt, what a pleasure. I have the collection you requested ready in the private viewing room. Private viewing room. Of course. The room was all cream leather and soft lighting, with velvet-lined trays displaying rings that probably cost more than most people's houses. Magnolia felt like she was going to be sick. "Try this one," Theo said, handing her a ring with an emerald-cut diamond so large it looked fake. "It's too much. It's adequate. It looks like I'm engaged to a drug lord." This time, he definitely almost smiled. "Try it anyway." She slipped it on. It was beautiful and cold and completely wrong. No. For the next 20 minutes, Theo presented rings, and Magnolia rejected each one. Too flashy, too traditional, too impersonal. Margot was starting to look nervous, probably calculating her lost commission. "What exactly are you looking for?" Theo finally asked. And there was something new in his voice. Not irritation, curiosity. "I don't know," Magnolia admitted quietly. "Something that doesn't feel like a business transaction, I guess." The silence that followed was heavy. Theo stood, walked to Margot, and whispered something. She nodded and disappeared, returning moments later with a small box. "This just came in," Margot said softly. "It's not what you requested, Mr. Vanderbilt, but—" Theo opened the box. Inside was a ring unlike any of the others, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, set in a vintage gold band with intricate filigree. It was unique. It was stunning. It was perfect. "It's an estate piece," Margot explained. "Early 1920s. The sapphire is from Kashmir, quite rare. The story is that it belonged to a countess who married for love against her family's wishes." Magnolia's throat tightened. Theo was watching her face with an intensity that made her nervous. "Try it," he said, his voice different, softer. She slipped it on, and it fit perfectly. The blue caught the light, and for a moment, Magnolia forgot this was all fake. For a moment, it felt real. "We'll take it," Theo told Margot, not taking his eyes off Magnolia. In the car ride back, Magnolia kept twisting the ring on her finger, watching the sapphire catch the sunlight. Theo was back on his phone, but she caught him glancing at her twice. "Why that ring?" she finally asked. "It wasn't what you originally wanted." Theo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "My mother had a sapphire ring. Not as fine as that one, but she wore it every day. Even when my father spent all his time at the office and she ate dinner alone." He paused. "She said sapphires were for truth, for loyalty, for the love that doesn't come easy but lasts." Magnolia stared at him, seeing for the first time a crack in the perfect, cold facade. "Where is she now?" "Dead. 10 years ago. Cancer." He said it without emotion, but his jaw was tight. "She made my father promise to take care of me. Instead, he worked himself to death within a year and left me with nothing but debts and a failing company. I was 22. So you rebuilt it," Magnolia said softly. "Alone." "Yes." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something raw in those amber eyes. "I don't believe in love, Miss Castellane. I believe in contracts, in tangible outcomes, in things I can control." He gestured to the ring. "But I'm not a complete monster. If you have to wear a symbol of this arrangement, it should at least be one you don't hate." Magnolia didn't know what to say. This glimpse of humanity was somehow more terrifying than his coldness. "Thank you," she finally whispered. He nodded once and looked away. "We need to discuss living arrangements. The contract requires cohabitation." And just like that, the moment shattered. "Absolutely not. It's not negotiable. We need to appear married. That means living together." "Then you can move into my apartment," Magnolia shot back. "It's cozy. We have 3 cacti and a leaky faucet." His look said exactly what he thought of that idea. "I have a penthouse with 5 bedrooms. You'll have your own wing. We won't even have to see each other. Except when we're playing happy couple for the cameras." "Exactly." He checked his watch. "I'll have your things moved this weekend. Frederick will provide the address. I didn't agree. You did. Page 7 of the contract, subsection C. He raised an eyebrow. Did you not read what you signed? She had. She just hadn't wanted to think about that part. Magnolia spent the rest of the ride in silence, twisting her new ring and wondering how her life had become a Shakespearean tragedy crossed with a corporate merger. When the car stopped at her building, she moved to leave, but Theo's voice stopped her. Miss Castellane. She turned back. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. The pink dress. It suits you better than I expected. Before she could respond, Frederick was opening her door, and Theo was back on his phone, dismissing her from his attention as easily as one closes a book. But as Magnolia walked up to her apartment, she caught herself smiling at the backhanded compliment. And she hated herself a little for it. Magnolia had imagined many scenarios for how moving day would go. None of them involved a team of professional movers treating her second-hand furniture like archaeological artifacts, while Theo Vanderbilt stood in her living room looking deeply uncomfortable. This is unnecessary, she said for the 5th time, watching a burly man wrap her $30 coffee table in bubble wrap like it was made of spun glass. I could have packed my own things. Inefficient, Theo replied, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning her apartment with the focus of someone conducting a safety inspection. He picked up one of her dying cacti. This plant is barely alive. His name is Fernando, and he's doing his best. Magnolia snatched the pot back. Not everyone thrives under pressure. Clearly. But there was something almost playful in his tone. Julia burst through the door carrying 2 coffees and stopped dead at the sight of Theo. She'd seen photos, but photos apparently hadn't prepared her for the real thing. Holy, she started. Julia, this is Theo. Theo, my best friend Julia, who has no filter. Magnolia shot her a warning look. The filter is working fine. It's just overwhelmed. Julia handed Magnolia a coffee, still staring. So you're the corporate overlord holding my best friend hostage. Julia, Magnolia hissed. But Theo surprised them both by extending his hand. That's an accurate summary. And you're the publicist who convinced her to negotiate rather than run screaming. Julia blinked. You investigated me? I investigate everyone. He said it like it was obvious. You graduated top of your class, turned around 3 failing brands in 2 years, and you volunteer at an animal shelter every Sunday. You're also fiercely loyal and would probably kill for Magnolia if necessary. The room went silent. Okay, that's either really impressive or really creepy, Julia finally said. I haven't decided which. Both, Magnolia and Theo said simultaneously, then looked at each other in surprise. 2 hours later, Magnolia stood in the penthouse that was apparently now her home, and her brain couldn't process what she was seeing. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. The living room was bigger than her entire apartment. Everything was sleek, modern, and aggressively expensive. Your wing is this way, Theo said, leading her down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than her veterinary degree. He opened double doors to reveal a suite that belonged in a luxury hotel. King-sized bed with impossibly soft-looking linens. A bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. A walk-in closet currently being filled with her modest wardrobe, which looked tragically out of place. I can't live here, Magnolia whispered. You already do. Legally, as of this morning. Theo leaned against the doorframe. I'll have a stylist come by tomorrow. You'll need appropriate clothing for events. I don't need a stylist. I need my life back. Something flickered in his expression. We all need things we can't have, Miss Castellane. The difference is I've learned to stop wanting them. Before she could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at it, and his entire demeanor shifted, shoulders tensing, jaw tightening. I need to take this. He was already walking away. Kitchen is fully stocked. Frederick's number is on the fridge if you need anything. And just like that, she was alone in a gilded cage. That night, Magnolia couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft, the silence too heavy, the whole situation too surreal. At 2 a.m., she gave up and padded to the kitchen in her oversized veterinary school t-shirt and shorts. The kitchen was a minimalist dream of stainless steel and marble. She was searching for the tea when she heard footsteps. Theo appeared in the doorway, and Magnolia's brain short-circuited. He was in black pajama pants and nothing else. His torso was lean and defined, with a few faint scars she tried not to stare at. His hair was disheveled, falling across his forehead in a way that made him look almost human. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice rougher than usual. "Bed's too comfortable." "It's suspicious." She turned back to the cabinets, desperate to look anywhere but at his bare chest. "Where's the tea?" "Upper left cabinet." He moved past her, and she caught a scent of cedar and something uniquely him. He pulled down a box of expensive-looking tea. "Chamomile or Earl Grey?" "You have chamomile?" "I pictured you drinking motor oil and tears of your enemies." That almost smile again. "I saved that for breakfast." They stood in the kitchen, brewing tea in comfortable silence that shouldn't have been comfortable at all. Theo leaned against the counter, watching her with those unnervingly perceptive amber eyes. "Tell me about your aunt," he said suddenly. Magnolia wrapped her hands around her mug. "Why?" "Because I'm forcing you to marry me to save her life. I should at least know who she is." It was such an unexpectedly decent thing to say that Magnolia found herself answering. "She's the best person I know. When my parents died in a car accident when I was 16, she was the only Castellane who showed up to the funeral. My grandfather disowned my dad, but Aunt Violet never stopped loving him." Magnolia's throat tightened. "She helped raise me, paid for part of my education. She sent me handmade cards for every birthday with terrible puns inside." "Terrible puns?" Theo raised an eyebrow. "The worst. Last year she wrote, 'You're not getting older, you're just becoming a vintage magnolia, more valuable with time.'" She smiled through tears. "It was awful. I loved it." Theo was quiet for a long moment. "She sounds worth saving." "She is, even if it costs me everything." "Not everything." His voice was soft. 2.5 years. Then you're free, and you'll have enough money to do whatever you want. Open your own veterinary practice, travel, live anywhere." "What about you?" Magnolia asked. "What happens when you get your empire? Will it be enough?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He looked down at his tea, jaw working. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "I've spent 10 years building this. Revenge against everyone who said I'd fail, who wanted to see my father's company crumble. But after?" He shook his head. "I haven't thought that far." "That's sad," Magnolia said softly. "That's realistic." But there was no bite in his words. They stood there, two people trapped in a bizarre arrangement, drinking tea at 2 a.m. in a kitchen that cost more than most homes. And somehow, impossibly, it felt almost normal. "Thank you," Magnolia finally said. "For the ring, for asking about Violet, for not being a complete monster." "The night's still young," Theo replied, but his tone was gentle. "I could still do something monstrous." "Like what? Force me to attend a charity gala?" His expression turned apologetic. "About that. We have one on Friday. Black tie. It's the soft launch of our engagement before the official announcement." Magnolia groaned. "You're the worst." "I know." He set down his mug. "Get some sleep, Miss Castellane. Tomorrow the stylist arrives at 10 and she's terrifying." As he walked away, Magnolia called out, "It's Magnolia. If we're living together and fake married, you can use my first name." He paused at the doorway, looking back. "Magnolia," he said, testing it out. The way he said it, soft, careful, almost reverent, made her stomach flip. "Good night, Theo." "Good night." And as she returned to her too comfortable bed, Magnolia realized the most dangerous thing about Theo Vanderbilt wasn't his coldness or his power. It was the brief, rare moments when he was neither. The stylist, a woman named Simone who wore all black and spoke in clipped French-accented English, looked at Magnolia like she was a particularly challenging Rubik's Cube. "You have good bones," she declared, circling Magnolia in the penthouse living room. "But you dress like someone who has given up on joy. When did you stop caring?" "Around the time I was forced into a fake marriage," Magnolia muttered. Simone's eyes lit up. "Ah, fire. Good. We work with fire." 3 hours later, Magnolia barely recognized herself. The dress Simone had chosen was a deep emerald silk that hugged every curve before flowing into a dramatic skirt. It had a dangerously low back and a neckline that was elegant but devastating. Her hair was swept up in a sophisticated twist, with a few deliberate tendrils framing her face. "I look like you could destroy a man with a glance." "Perfect." Simone kissed her fingers. "Mr. Vanderbilt will swallow his tongue." "That's not the goal." "Maybe not, but it will be fun, no?" At exactly 7 p.m., Magnolia descended the penthouse staircase in heels that cost more than her monthly rent used to. Theo was waiting in the foyer, checking his watch. He wore a tuxedo that was so perfectly tailored it looked painted on. He looked up and stopped breathing. Magnolia watched, fascinated, as something raw and unguarded flashed across his face. His eyes traveled from her face down the dress and back up. And when they met hers again, there was heat in them she'd never seen before. "You look..." He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. Something she'd never seen him do. "Adequate." "Adequate?" She raised an eyebrow. "Simone said I look like I could destroy a man with a glance." "Simone talks too much." But his voice was rough, and he couldn't seem to stop looking at her. He cleared his throat and offered his arm. "Shall we?" The gala was at the Metropolitan Museum, because of course it was. As they entered the great hall, Magnolia felt every eye turn toward them. Cameras flashed. People whispered behind champagne flutes. "Smile," Theo murmured, his hand settling on the small of her bare back. The touch sent electricity up her spine. "You're madly in love with me, remember? I'm madly tolerating you. There's a difference." His lips twitched. To anyone watching, it would look like he was whispering sweet nothings. "The woman in red at 3 o'clock is Catherine Ashford. She's been trying to acquire part of Vanderbilt Industries for years. She'll try to find weakness. So what do I do? Be yourself." That seems to unsettle people effectively. Before Magnolia could respond, a silver-haired woman in a blood-red gown descended on them like an elegant vulture. "Theo, darling." She air-kissed both his cheeks. "You've been hiding. And who is this charming creature?" "Catherine." Theo's arm tightened around Magnolia's waist. "Meet my fiancé, Magnolia Castellan." Catherine's eyes sharpened. "Castellane, old Augusto's granddaughter. How convenient and sudden." Her smile was poisonous. "Tell me, dear, how did you two meet? I'm sure it's a fascinating story." Magnolia felt Theo tense, but she smiled sweetly. "He rear-ended my car at a coffee shop, totaled my Honda. I called him a reckless menace. He offered to buy me a new car, and I told him to go to hell." She looked up at Theo with theatrical adoration. It was love at first sight. Theo's expression remained neutral, but she felt him trying not to laugh. Catherine's smile tightened. "How colorful." "And the wedding?" "Small, intimate, unlike this." Magnolia gestured to the opulent hall. "Theo knows I prefer meaningful moments to spectacle. How refreshingly middle class." The insult was wrapped in silk. "How refreshingly honest," Magnolia countered. "You should try it sometime." Catherine's face went rigid. She excused herself with icy politeness. And the moment she was gone, Theo pulled Magnolia onto the balcony overlooking the city. "That was reckless, stupid, going to cost you business deals?" Magnolia winced. "Magnificent." He was looking at her with something like wonder. "Catherine Ashford has been insulting people at these events for 20 years. No one ever pushes back." "Well, someone should. She's awful." "She is." Theo stepped closer. and suddenly the balcony felt very small. But now she'll tell everyone that I'm so besotted with you, I let you insult my business associates. Is that bad? It's perfect. Makes us look real. His hand came up to brush a loose tendril of hair from her face, and the gesture was so gentle it made her heart stutter. You're good at this. At lying? At being brave. His thumb traced her cheekbone. At being exactly who you are, even when it's terrifying. The moment stretched between them, charged and dangerous. Magnolia's breath caught as Theo leaned closer, his eyes dropping to her lips. This wasn't part of the act. There were no cameras here, no one watching. Theo, she whispered, not sure if it was a warning or an invitation. His phone buzzed violently in his pocket, shattering the spell. He stepped back, jaw clenching as he checked it. Problem? She asked, trying to calm her racing heart. A board member stirring trouble. He pocketed the phone. I need to handle this. Will you be all right for a few minutes? I survived Catherine Ashford. I think I can manage. He smiled. A real, genuine smile that transformed his face. Yes, I believe you can. As he disappeared into the crowd, Magnolia gripped the balcony railing, trying to process what had almost happened. This was fake. A contract. 2.5 years and then freedom. So why did her lips still tingle with the ghost of a kiss that never happened? There you are. Julia appeared, stunning in a gold dress. I crashed this thing using my publicist credentials. Oh my God, Mag, you look amazing. And I just watched you destroy Catherine Ashford. I'm so proud I could cry. It might have been a mistake. It was glorious. Julia grabbed her hands. But more importantly, I saw the way Theo looked at you. Girl, that man is not faking anything. Jules, it's complicated. No, it's simple. He looks at you like you're oxygen and he's drowning. Julia squeezed her hands. The question is, how do you look at him? Magnolia opened her mouth to say she hated him, that this was just a transaction, that she couldn't wait for it to be over. But the words wouldn't come. Because somewhere between the pink dress rebellion and the 2 a.m. tea, and the way he'd said her name like a prayer, something had shifted, and that terrified her more than any contract ever could. Magnolia woke up to the smell of coffee, and the disconcerting realization that she'd dreamed about Theo. Not a nightmare about contracts or forced marriages. Something far worse. Something that involved that almost kiss on the balcony actually happening. She groaned into her pillow. When she finally emerged from her room, she found Theo in the kitchen, already dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark slacks, reading something on his tablet. He looked up as she shuffled in, wearing her oversized t-shirt and pajama shorts. Morning, he said, pushing a cup of coffee toward her. You made the society pages, front and center. Magnolia took the tablet with trembling hands. There they were, a stunning photo of her and Theo on the museum balcony, his hand on her face, their faces inches apart. The headline read, Vanderbilt's Mystery Fiancé, a love story or business strategy. That's not good, she whispered. Actually, it's perfect. Theo took the tablet back. People are invested, curious. That's what we need. He paused. Though Catherine Ashford gave a quote calling you a charming social climber. Of course she did. I bought her husband's tech company this morning and fired him. He's been embezzling for years. I just needed a reason to act. Theo said it casually, like he was discussing the weather. Magnolia stared at him. You destroyed a man's career because his wife insulted me? I destroyed a man's career because he was stealing. The timing was just convenient. But there was something protective in his eyes that made her chest tighten. Before she could respond, Theo's phone rang. His expression darkened as he looked at the screen. I have to take this. He disappeared into his office, and Magnolia heard his voice rise, something she'd never witnessed before. I don't care what the board thinks. No, that's final. Because she's my fiancé, and you'll treat her with respect or find another job. He emerged 10 minutes later, jaw tight, a muscle ticking in his cheek. What happened? Magnolia asked quietly. Some board members think you're a liability, that you're too... He waved his hand vaguely. Unpredictable. They want me to control you better. Control me? Her voice went dangerously quiet. I told them to go to hell. He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect style. You're not a liability, Magnolia. You're the most genuine person in that entire room last night. If they can't see that... He stopped abruptly, as if realizing he'd said too much. The air between them crackled with tension. Magnolia took a step closer. Theo, last night on the balcony, was for show. He cut her off, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. We need to maintain the illusion. Right, the illusion. She felt something crack in her chest. I need to visit Aunt Violet today, at the hospital. I'll drive you. That's not necessary. It is. His tone left no room for argument. If we're engaged, I should meet her. 2 hours later, they walked into St. Mary's Hospital. Aunt Violet was in a sunny room, looking frailer than Magnolia remembered, but with the same warm smile. Magnolia, darling. She opened her arms, and Magnolia rushed into them, breathing in her familiar lavender scent. Aunt Vi, I've missed you. And who is this handsome young man making my nurse blush in the hallway? Violet's eyes twinkled as she looked at Theo. This is Theo Vanderbilt, Magnolia's throat closed. Fiancé, Theo finished smoothly, stepping forward with a gentle smile Magnolia had never seen before. It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Castellane. Magnolia speaks of you constantly. Violet, please. And fiancé? Her eyes went wide. Magnolia and Castellane, when were you going to tell me? It happened quickly, Magnolia said, the lie tasting bitter. Very quickly. But as she watched Theo sit beside Aunt Violet, asking about her treatment with genuine interest, listening to her stories about Magnolia's childhood with what looked like real affection, the lie felt more complicated. She once tried to bring home 17 stray cats? Violet laughed. Said they were a family and couldn't be separated? 17? Theo looked at Magnolia with something like delight. What happened? I negotiated her down to 2, Violet said. She named them Romeo and Juliet. Very dramatic for a 10-year-old. That tracks, Theo murmured, and Magnolia kicked his ankle under the chair. When they left an hour later, Violet pulled Magnolia aside. He loves you, she whispered. I can see it in the way he looks at you. Like you're the only real thing in his world. Magnolia's heart clenched. Aunt Vi, it's complicated. Love always is, darling. She squeezed her hand. But don't run from it because you're scared. Your parents didn't. And they had the most beautiful love story I've ever seen. In the car ride home, silence stretched between them. Finally, Theo spoke. She's wonderful. I understand now why you'd do anything for her. She thinks you love me, Magnolia said quietly. Theo's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I know. We need to be more careful, set clearer boundaries. Agreed. But when they arrived at the penthouse and Magnolia went to her wing, she found a package on her bed. Inside was a vintage book, a first edition of Romeo and Juliet. The note read, For the girl who saves every stray, even the ones who don't deserve saving. T. Magnolia clutched the book to her chest and did something she hadn't done in years. She cried, because somewhere in this impossible arrangement, she'd started falling for the man she was supposed to hate, and she had no idea what to do about it. Magnolia found Theo on the penthouse terrace at midnight, tie loosened, jacket discarded, staring at the city lights with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked devastatingly beautiful and utterly broken. You're supposed to be asleep, he said without turning around. So are you. She moved to stand beside him, wrapping her cardigan tighter against the October wind. Bad day? Bad decade. He took a drink. My father died 10 years ago today. The confession hung in the air between them. Magnolia's heart squeezed. I'm sorry. Don't be. He was a terrible father. Theo's laugh was hollow. Worked himself to death chasing success, left me with a failing company and a reputation for being his disappointment. The board wanted to sell everything. I was 22, grieving, and absolutely certain I'd proved them all wrong. And you did. At what cost? He finally looked at her, and his eyes were haunted. I haven't taken a vacation in 10 years. Haven't had a relationship that lasted more than 2 months. Haven't done a single thing that wasn't calculated to build this empire. He gestured to the skyline. And for what? So I could force a woman who hates me into a fake marriage to secure a merger my dead father arranged? I don't hate you, Magnolia whispered. Theo went very still. You should. Well, I'm terrible at doing what I should. She took the glass from his hand and set it down. Theo, look at me. He did, and the vulnerability in his expression nearly undid her. You're not your father. You defended me to your board. You were kind to my aunt. You remembered a story about stray cats and bought me a book that probably cost more than my car. Her voice cracked. You're not the monster you pretend to be. Magnolia. And maybe this started as a transaction, but it doesn't feel like one anymore. Not to me. The words hung between them, terrifying and true. Theo's jaw worked, emotions warring across his face. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that somewhere between the pink dress and the sapphire ring and every 2 a.m. conversation, I started... His phone exploded with noise. Both their phones did. Message after message, calls flooding in. Theo grabbed his phone, and Magnolia watched his face go from confused to furious, to absolutely murderous. What is it? He turned his screen toward her. It was a news article, posted 20 minutes ago. Vanderbilt engagement a sham. Sources say Castellane heiress forced into marriage to save dying aunt. Magnolia's blood turned to ice. The article had everything. The testamentary clause, Aunt Violet's condition, even quotes from anonymous sources detailing the contract. How? She started. Someone on the board. Theo was already dialing. Someone who wants to destroy the merger and doesn't care who they hurt to do it. His phone rang before he could make the call. He answered, and Magnolia heard a man's angry voice on the other end. I don't care about your excuses, Richard. You have 24 hours to find the leak or you're fired. Theo hung up and immediately called someone else. Legal? I need a defamation suit prepared, and I want to know who talked to the press. Pull phone records, emails, everything. He made 6 more calls while Magnolia stood frozen, watching their carefully constructed lie crumble in real time. When he finally stopped, his hands were shaking. Theo, I'm sorry. His voice was raw. This is my fault. I should have protected you better. Your fault? Someone from your company betrayed us. And I brought you into this world. He turned to her, and she'd never seen him so unguarded. You were safe in your tiny apartment with your dying cacti and your honest life. I dragged you into this nightmare because I wanted an empire more than I cared about collateral damage. And now... His voice broke. Now they've dragged your aunt's illness into tabloids, made you look like a gold digger, destroyed any privacy you had left. Theo, stop. You should leave. He said it quietly, definitively. I'll handle the fallout. I'll make sure Violet's treatment continues regardless. I'll void the contract, pay whatever penalties. Are you actually this stupid? Magnolia's voice rose. You think I'm running because of bad press? You should. Any sane person would. Then I guess I'm insane. She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. I'm not leaving, you idiot. We face this together. Why? It came out as a broken whisper. Why would you stay? Because I... The words caught in her throat. She couldn't say it. Not yet. Not like this. Because you gave me a book about star-crossed lovers, and I'm apparently a sucker for romantic gestures from emotionally stunted billionaires. Something like hope flickered in his eyes. Magnolia. We fight back, she said firmly. Together. We tell our story, our way. No more hiding. Theo searched her face for a long moment. Then slowly, he pulled her into his arms. It was the first time he'd held her without cameras, without an audience, without pretense. It felt like coming home. "I don't deserve you," he murmured into her hair. "Probably not. But you're stuck with me for 2.5 years, so you better get used to it." She felt him smile against her temple. 2.5 years. Maybe longer, she whispered before she could stop herself. Theo pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes searching hers with desperate intensity. "Maybe longer," he repeated, like a prayer, like a promise. And there, on the terrace at midnight with their world falling apart around them, something shifted. The contract was no longer enough. The arrangement was no longer sufficient, and both of them knew it. The press conference was Magnolia's idea. Theo had wanted to handle it through lawyers and corporate statements, but she'd insisted on something more direct. "We tell the truth," she'd said that morning over coffee. "Not all of it, but enough. We own the narrative." Now, standing backstage at the Vanderbilt Industries conference room with 50 reporters waiting beyond the curtain, Magnolia wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. "You don't have to do this," Theo said quietly, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. A nervous gesture she'd never seen from him before. "Yes, I do." She straightened his collar. "We do this together, remember?" He caught her hand, pressing it against his chest where she could feel his heart racing. "Magnolia, before we go out there, I need to tell you something." "Theo?" "The contract. The arrangement. It was supposed to be simple." His amber eyes held hers with devastating intensity. "But nothing about you has ever been simple. You walked into my office in that blazer with fire in your eyes, and you've been setting my carefully ordered world ablaze ever since. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "It's everything." His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "You make me want things I'd given up on. A real home. Someone to share 2 a.m. tea with. Someone who looks at me and sees a person instead of a portfolio." Magnolia's breath caught. "Theo, I'm in love with you," he said simply, devastatingly. "I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you wore that ridiculous pink dress out of spite. Maybe when you told Catherine Ashford to go to hell. Maybe the moment you chose to save your aunt over your freedom." He cupped her face with both hands. "But I am completely, irrevocably in love with you, and I need you to know that before we walk through that door." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You absolute idiot. I've been in love with you for weeks. Since the sapphire ring. Since you asked about Aunt Violet. Since you gave me a book and called me someone worth saving. Magnolia." She kissed him. Finally, desperately, completely. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer, and the kiss was everything their almost kiss on the balcony had promised and more. It was urgent and tender, and felt like falling and flying simultaneously. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Theo rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably go face the reporters now," he murmured. "Probably." But neither of them moved. Julia poked her head backstage. "Hate to interrupt whatever this is, but you're on in 2 minutes. And you have lipstick." She gestured vaguely at Theo's face. "Everywhere." They walked onto the stage hand in hand. Camera flashes exploded. Questions erupted before they even reached the podium. Theo raised a hand, and the room quieted. "Thank you all for coming. I'll make a brief statement, then we'll take limited questions." He glanced at Magnolia, and she nodded. "Yesterday, a story was published suggesting that my engagement to Magnolia Castellane was coerced. I'm here to address that directly." The room held its breath. The story was partially true. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Magnolia squeezed his hand. "My father and Magnolia's grandfather did arrange a business merger contingent on our marriage. And yes, there were consequences if we refused. Consequences that would have affected Magnolia's aunt, who is battling cancer." A reporter shouted a question, but Theo continued. "What the story got wrong was everything that matters. They suggested Magnolia was forced. She wasn't. She chose to protect someone she loves, which is the most courageous thing I've ever witnessed. His voice roughened. They suggested this was purely a business arrangement. It started that way, but somewhere between the contract and this moment, it became real. She became real. We became real. He turned to face Magnolia fully, ignoring the cameras. I fell in love with a woman who fights for stray cats and dying relatives, who wears pink dresses to prove a point, who sees through every wall I've built and refuses to let me hide. His eyes shone. The contract expires in 2.5 years, but I'm hoping, desperately hoping, that she'll choose to stay anyway. Magnolia couldn't speak through her tears, so she just kissed him again, right there in front of 50 cameras and the entire business world. The room erupted. Questions flew. Miss Castellane, is this true? Mr. Vanderbilt, what about the board? When's the wedding? Magnolia stepped to the microphone, still holding Theo's hand. Yes, it's true, all of it. We started as a business arrangement and became something neither of us expected. Something real, something worth fighting for. She looked at Theo. And to answer the last question, the wedding is whenever this man finally officially asks me to marry him for real. Theo's eyebrows shot up. Then, to Magnolia's absolute shock and the delight of every camera in the room, he dropped to one knee. Magnolia Castellane, you infuriating, brilliant, beautiful woman, will you marry me? Not because of a contract or a merger or a dying man's wishes, but because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life being set on fire by you. You're insane. She laughed through tears. We're already engaged. That was a fake engagement. This is real. So what do you say? Yes, she whispered. Yes, you ridiculous man. Yes. The crowd cheered as Theo stood and kissed her, and for a moment, everything was perfect. Then Magnolia's phone rang. The hospital. Her blood turned to ice. I have to take this. She stepped off stage, and Theo followed, his face already pale. He knew. Somehow, he knew. Miss Castellane? The nurse's voice was gentle. It's about your aunt. You should come quickly. The world tilted. Theo caught her as her knees buckled, already pulling out his phone. Frederick, bring the car around. Now. As they raced to the hospital, Magnolia clutched Theo's hand and prayed. They'd just found their happiness. Surely the universe wouldn't take it away now. The hospital corridor stretched endlessly before them. Magnolia's hand was ice cold in Theo's grip as they rushed toward Aunt Violet's room. Every terrible possibility raced through her mind. They burst through the door to find Aunt Violet sitting up in bed, smiling weakly but undeniably alive. Aunt Vi! Magnolia collapsed at her bedside, sobbing with relief. Oh, sweetheart, I'm sorry for scaring you. Violet stroked her hair with a frail hand. The nurse shouldn't have called with such urgency. What happened? Theo asked, positioning himself protectively behind Magnolia. Dr. Morrison entered, a genuine smile on her face, something Magnolia had never seen from the usually stoic oncologist. I have excellent news. The latest scans show that Violet's tumor has shrunk by 60%. The experimental treatment we added to her protocol is working far better than we hoped. She looked at Magnolia. Your aunt is going to make it. The room spun. Magnolia couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the overwhelming relief crashing over her like a wave. I'm going to be okay, Violet whispered. You're going to be okay, Dr. Morrison confirmed. You still have treatment ahead, but the prognosis has gone from grim to genuinely hopeful. Magnolia turned into Theo's chest and wept, his arms wrapped around her, strong and sure, and she felt his own tears in her hair. She's going to make it, she sobbed. Theo, she's going to make it. I know, love, I know. He kissed the top of her head, and when she looked up, his face was wet with tears too. Violet watched them with knowing eyes. So it's real then. What you announced at that press conference. I saw it on the television before the nurse rushed in." "It's real," Magnolia said, moving back to take her aunt's hand. "It started as a contract, but love doesn't follow contracts," Violet finished gently. She looked at Theo. "Young man, come here." Theo approached the bed, and Violet took his hand. "You love my niece." "With everything I am," he said simply. "And you'll protect her? Not from the world, but alongside her as she faces it? Every single day." Violet smiled and placed their joined hands together. "Then you have my blessing. Not that either of you need it. You're both stubborn enough to do what you want anyway." She laughed, then coughed. "But for what it's worth, I think you're perfect for each other." That evening, back at the penthouse, Magnolia found Theo in his office staring at a document on his computer. He looked up as she entered, and the smile that crossed his face made her heart skip. "Come here," he said, pulling her onto his lap. "I want to show you something." On the screen was a legal document. Dissolution of contractual marriage agreement. "I had legal draw it up this afternoon," Theo explained. "The original contract is void. You're free, Magnolia. No obligations, no timeline, no consequences. Violet's treatment is guaranteed regardless, in writing, for as long as she needs it." Magnolia stared at the document, then at him. "You're setting me free? I'm giving you a choice. The choice you should have had from the beginning." His hands framed her face. "Stay with me because you want to, not because you have to. Marry me because you love me, not because of a dead man's wishes. And what about the merger? The company? I don't care." And he meant it. She could see it in his eyes. "The board can dissolve it, contest it, do whatever they want. You're worth more than any empire." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "You really have changed. You changed me." He wiped her tears with his thumbs. "You taught me that some things can't be calculated or controlled. That love is worth more than power. That being vulnerable isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing we can do." Magnolia kissed him softly. "I'm not going anywhere. I choose you, Theo Vanderbilt. Not because of a contract. Because you're mine and I'm yours. And that's the only arrangement I need. Magnolia Castellane, you are the best deal I've ever made." She laughed. "Did you just compare our relationship to a business transaction?" "Old habits," he grinned, and she'd never seen him look so young, so free. "I'll work on it." "You better." She kissed him again, deeper this time. "We have the rest of our lives for you to practice." His phone buzzed, then hers, then both again. "We should probably check those," Magnolia sighed. It was Julia. "OMG, the internet is exploding. You two are relationship goals. Also, Catherine Ashford got arrested for insider trading. Karma is real." Then a message from Richard, Theo's lawyer. "Board voted unanimously to approve the merger and your leadership. Stock prices are up 23%. That press conference was genius." Theo laughed. A real, genuine laugh that Magnolia wanted to bottle and keep forever. "We did it," he said wonderingly. "Everything we were supposed to lose, we kept. And we got each other. Not everything went according to plan, though." "No," he agreed, pulling her closer. "It went better." That night, they fell asleep tangled together in Theo's bed. Not because the contract required cohabitation, but because neither could bear to be apart. And somewhere in the city, in a hospital room, Aunt Violet smiled at the news coverage of her niece and the man who'd learned to love her. The contract that had brought them together was ashes, but the love they'd built, that was forever. And it was written not in legal jargon or corporate terms, but in every kiss, every touch, every whispered promise in the dark. Some deals, Magnolia thought as she drifted off in Theo's arms, are too precious to put a price on. Some loves are worth every risk, and some happily ever afters are worth fighting for, together. 2 years later. The June sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, catching on the framed photo that hung in the hallway. Magnolia and Theo on their wedding day, laughing as Fernando the cactus photobombed their first kiss as husband and wife. "Mom! Dad! Aunt Vi is here." Magnolia looked up from the surgery notes she was reviewing to see their newly adopted daughter, 8-year-old Sophia, racing through the living room with the energy of a small tornado. Behind her trotted Romeo and Juliet, the original cats, now elderly and pampered beyond reason. "Inside voice, meu amor," Magnolia called out, but she was smiling. Theo emerged from his office, loosening his tie, and scooped Sophia up in his arms. "Did you finish your homework?" "Yes. And I drew a picture of the new puppy we're getting." Sophia held up a crayon drawing of what appeared to be a dog the size of a small horse. "We haven't agreed to a puppy," Theo said, but his resolve was already weakening. It always did with Sophia. "But Dad, you said if I got all A's?" "I said we'd discuss it." "Which means yes." Sophia kissed his cheek and wiggled down, running to greet Aunt Violet, who was walking through the door looking healthy, vibrant, and carrying her famous lemon cake. "There's my favorite girl." Violet set down the cake to embrace Sophia. She looked at Magnolia and Theo, her eyes bright. 2 years cancer-free as of today. Magnolia's throat tightened as she hugged her aunt. 2 years. God, Vi, I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of all of us. Violet looked around the penthouse, which had transformed from a sterile showroom into a real home. Photos everywhere, Sophia's artwork on the fridge, dog toys, they'd gotten the puppy 3 months ago despite Theo's protests, scattered across the floor. Look at this life you've built. Julia arrived minutes later with her new girlfriend, bringing wine and gossip. "You will not believe who called my office today. Catherine Ashford, from prison, asking if I'd represent her for an image rehabilitation campaign." "Please tell me you said no," Magnolia laughed. "I said I'd think about it for $1 million, up front." Julia grinned. She hung up. Dinner was chaotic and perfect. Sophia telling elaborate stories about school, Aunt Violet sharing updates about the library she now volunteered at, Julia debating whether to propose to her girlfriend. Theo's hand never left Magnolia's knee under the table, a constant reminder that this was real. This was theirs. After everyone left and Sophia was tucked into bed, Magnolia found Theo on the terrace where they'd had so many pivotal conversations. He pulled her into his arms, and they swayed slowly to music only they could hear. "I have news," Theo murmured against her hair. "Good or bad?" "The board wants me to step back, reduce my hours." He pulled back to see her face. "They think I'm too distracted by my family to run the company effectively." Magnolia's heart sank. "Theo, I told them they were absolutely right." His smile was radiant. "I'm promoting Marcus to CEO. I'll stay on as chairman, but only part-time. I want to be present. For you, for Sophia, for whatever comes next." Whatever comes next. Theo's hand moved to rest on her still flat stomach, his eyes questioning. She hadn't told him yet, had only found out that morning. "How did you—" she started. "You've been tired, emotional. And you hid the pregnancy test box terribly." He cupped her face, and his eyes were wet. "We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby," she confirmed, laughing through tears. Theo kissed her like she was oxygen and he was drowning. Still, after 2 years, with that same desperate tenderness. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "You know what I was thinking about today," he whispered. "That first day you walked into my office, how you looked at me like I was the enemy, how I was so certain I could keep it professional, keep you at arm's length. You were terrible at it. The worst." He laughed. "You demolished every wall I'd spent 10 years building in a matter of weeks. Made me want impossible things. Made me believe in them." "I love you," Magnolia said simply. "Not because a contract forced us together. Not because of mergers or empires or obligations. But because you're you. Because you learned to put people before profit. Because you cry at Sophia's school plays and let her convince you to adopt every stray animal she finds. Because you're the best man I know. I love you, Theo echoed, for teaching me that some things can't be controlled or calculated. That love is worth more than any empire. That family, his hand pressed gently against her stomach, is the only legacy that matters. They stood there as the city lights flickered on below them, two people who'd been forced together by circumstance and stayed together by choice. Inside, Sophia called out from her room, a nightmare, wanting her parents. They went together, as they did everything now, and climbed into her small bed on either side of their daughter. Sophia settled immediately, secure between them. "Tell me the story," she mumbled sleepily. "About how you met." "Well," Theo began, winking at Magnolia over Sophia's head. "Your mom rear-ended my car and called me a reckless menace." "That's not what happened," Magnolia protested, but she was laughing. "Then you tell it." So Magnolia told their daughter a story about a contract that became a choice, an arrangement that became love, and two stubborn people who fought against fate until they realized fate knew what it was doing all along. By the time she finished, Sophia was asleep. Theo's hand was laced with hers across their daughter's back, and Magnolia thought about how impossibly lucky they were. Some love stories start with a meet-cute. Theirs started with a contract, a dying aunt, and a forced marriage. But it became something neither of them expected. A partnership built on trust, a family built on love, and a future built on the simple truth that the best things in life can't be planned. They can only be chosen, fought for, and cherished. Every single day. The end.